out. What's going on, Broncos country? We are live. Just going to give the stream a moment to get all set up here. Make sure that everything is nice and stable all across the YouTube platform. Welcome in, everyone. Denver Broncos finally get a win at home as they take down the Green Bay Packers 19-17 in a game where they jumped out to a 16-3 lead, and defense had some struggles there, especially in the third quarter, but they were able to rally, especially on the last couple of drives of the game. They were able to force an interception on Jordan Love that basically sealed the game for Denver with PJ Locke. This game wasn't without its controversy, though, of course, as Kareem Jackson did get ejected after another very questionable hit. This one on Packers tight end Luke Musgrave. Last ones, of course, he had a bad hit on Logan Thomas. He's had a bad hit on Jacoby Myers. This is like the third or fourth incident now for Kareem Jackson. He's been fined multiple times. Given his recent history with these kind of flagrant hits, I would not be surprised at all if we saw a potential Kareem Jackson suspension coming here from the league. I was paying attention to the officials after this hit by Kareem Jackson, just seeing how they were going about things. And it was clear that they were talking to New York. So it was New York that initiated this ejection by Kareem Jackson here. And at the end of the day, I put out a video on it on my channel. I feel like that ejection was indeed justified. I do feel like that ejection did make sense. It was probably more based off of Kareem Jackson's recent history than anything else. I don't necessarily think that this hit just on its own was extraordinarily egregious, but again, when you combine just multiple different factors here with Kareem Jackson's previous history with these kinds of hits, you know that the NFL is going to err on the side of caution and not they're just going to err on the side of caution here. Looks like, I don't know if YouTube hasn't pushed the stream out or what, but we have got like nobody in the house right now. That is definitely abnormal. So hopefully YouTube pushes this stream out and everyone can see it, because, yeah, it's not normal that we have 0 viewers in the chat. So hopefully we can get some people on in here. I will go ahead and actually also share the stream on Twitter here. Go ahead and get a link to that going. There we go. So I know that this is definitely a win for some in Broncos country that has brought a little bit of stress and anguish. I know this is probably one of the more controversial and decisive wins that the Broncos have gotten in recent memory, and that's partially due to the fact that the team may have lost out on the Caleb Williams sweepstakes with this win. That is a very distinct possibility here. But at the end of the day, man, this also showcased one thing. The Denver Broncos are not the worst team in the NFL. This has proven that. If the Denver Broncos were the worst team in the NFL, they would have completely gone out there and taken a big fat dump in their helmets against the Green Bay Packers, who I had said from the get-go that if the Denver Broncos were on their P's and Q's, this could have been a very winnable game for them. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. The Packers' defense collapsed at inopportune times. Their offense was just completely disastrous. What is my cat yelling at? Kitty, kitty. Kitty, kitty. My cat was yelling. I don't know what my cat was yelling at there. But again, man, this was one that the Denver Broncos, since they were on their P's and Q's, they were able to get away with a win against a very beatable opponent. Obviously, next week, we've got a home date against the Kansas City Chiefs, so that's going to make life really, really challenging for this Denver Broncos team. If we're going to try to get the season back on track, we have to somehow, some way pull out an upset win over the Kansas City Chiefs. But to get back into the Caleb Williams conversation, since, once again, it's weird. There's, like, nobody in here. I don't know. I do not know why YouTube hasn't pushed this out. Like, I'm curious if, like, subscribers aren't getting notified or what. Definitely weird. Definitely weird. All right, well then, I guess we're just going to go into video making mode now until people start going in here. So, yeah, that's what we're going to do. So, did the Denver Broncos lose out on Caleb Williams? This was a win for the Denver Broncos that definitely stirred up some controversy from a lot of people in Broncos country, because this win, putting the Denver Broncos now at 2-5, may have knocked us out of the Caleb Williams sweepstakes and knocked us out of contention for the number 1 overall pick. In fact, we'll go ahead and look up the NFL draft order right now, because obviously the Carolina Panthers are still the worst team in football right now, and the Chicago Bears are the owners of their first-round pick. So according to Tankathon right here, the Chicago Bears, via the Carolina Panthers, hold the number 1 overall pick. We'll come over here to scene 2 here. The Arizona Cardinals hold the number 2 overall pick. Chicago Bears hold the number 3 overall pick. And Denver's win in Chicago over the Bears currently has them at the number 4 overall pick, along with a bunch of other 2-win teams down here as well. For those who are curious, Green Bay, who are now sitting at 2-4, would have the 7th overall pick if the season ended today. So right now, the Denver Broncos could realistically be completely out of both the Caleb Williams and the Drake May conversation, because you imagine that Chicago would probably go Caleb Williams number 1 overall, and then Arizona, if they don't stick with Kyler Murray, they'll probably go with whoever's left over. If Arizona does stick with Kyler Murray and this record does indeed hold, then I strongly believe that they might consider trading down and trying to acquire more assets. Denver might be a team that could come up with them. But right now, if the season ended today, the Denver Broncos would be sitting at 2-5, and there's a chance that the top 2 quarterbacks in Caleb Williams and Drake May might be off the board. So then for the Denver Broncos, if you were really gun set on taking a quarterback with the number 4 overall pick, if that's what you have, then you're probably going to be stuck picking between someone like a Michael Penix Jr., somebody of that nature. So I feel like the Denver Broncos have definitely got themselves in a little bit of an interesting position right now, given the fact that they've lost out on position to get the number 1 overall pick. Prior to this, they were sitting pretty firmly at that number 2 spot. But with an Arizona Cardinals loss today over the Seattle Seahawks, Chicago, they did win, however, against the Raiders, but obviously Denver would hold the quote-unquote tiebreaker there since they won their game against Chicago in Week 4. That is a loss for Denver that pretty firmly made me believe that they were never truly going to have a chance at getting Caleb Williams. I honestly thought that the Denver Broncos were going to always end up picking somewhere in this number 4 to maybe number 10 overall spot. And because of that, you might not be in a position to get a top quarterback. I know that's going to probably stress and upset a lot of members of Broncos country, but that's unfortunately where we are right now. That is just where the team is. So if the Denver Broncos are not in a position to get a top quarterback, then what do? We've got Garrett Shelton in the house saying clickbait. What's going on, Garrett? Good to see you. If the Denver Broncos are picking somewhere in this 4 to 10 range, do you trade down? Do you try to target maybe a top offensive tackle prospect? I know the offensive tackle out of Penn State's gotten a lot of big-time buzz. Do you try to target maybe a Marvin Harrison Jr.? Do you try to maybe trade up with Arizona if they try to ride with Kyler Murray? If the Denver Broncos do indeed end up with this number 4 overall pick, then that's going to lead to a lot of really interesting conversations going forward. But right now, I think it's been pretty clearly established that there are worse teams in the NFL than the Denver Broncos. And the Denver Broncos, like I've said before, players are never going to go out there and intentionally lose football games. And Sean Payton kind of proved that the coaches aren't going to do it either, because that last play there where the Broncos ran out the clock and ran around and Russ launched it out of bounds to run out the clock, I was a little worried about that play call, because I thought that there was a chance that they would have thrown it out of bounds and there still would have been 1 second left on the clock. That would have put Green Bay in field goal range. So if the Broncos had, by that play call, that honestly kind of made me question Sean Payton's intentions a little bit, if he was really attentive on winning that game. But then you think about games such as the Miracle at the Meadowlands, where if we would have punted, there would have been a chance of Green Bay returning it to the house and winning the game. So again, hindsight is 2020. The Denver Broncos did win that game. But when it comes to players are never going to tank. They're never going to intentionally make their film look bad just so their team can go out and draft their potential replacement. That's not what happens. So at the end of the day, the Denver Broncos, unless they truly had the least amount of talent in the NFL, which, yeah, they're bottom 3 in terms of talent on their roster. There's no doubt about that. But there are other teams out there that have very clearly shown that not only do they have less talent than the Denver Broncos, they're way worse coached than the Denver Broncos are. And that is why I truly believe that the Denver Broncos were never going to get the number 1 overall pick, and I wasn't going to get my hopes up to be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes until we actually had that number 1 overall pick in our hands. Since that hasn't happened, right now, what I'm trying to focus on for this team is determining who is going to be a part of this team long term. I still think this team is entering a rebuild phase. I still think that guys such as Jerry Jeudy are going to be traded, but this win might have also signaled that the Denver Broncos could keep some players in the building, such as a Justin Simmons, who prior to this, I thought there was a strong chance that he could get shipped off to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, for example. So that's kind of where the Denver Broncos are right now there. We've got DS in the house. Good to see you, man. We got Michael Ronquillo in the house all the way from Tucson, Arizona. Great to see you. Great to see you. Looks like my camera completely unfocused there. That is the life of the YouTuber land, but anyway. So yeah, guys, I know that this win is a little bit divisive to some in Broncos country right now just because of the whole Caleb Williams thing. But for me, winning's hard in the NFL. I'm going to relish in this win for at least the next 24 hours and be happy about it. We'll deal with the long-term consequences and ramifications potentially of this win moving forward, but I'm not going to apologize for getting a win. I'm not going to do that. DS says the trade value for Sutton was upped. Absolutely. But I also think in the last couple of weeks, the locker room value and the on-field value for the Denver Broncos of Courtland Sutton has started to elevate. We saw that in this game, that Courtland Sutton can kind of be that quasi number 1 receiver for us this year. Financially, it does probably make sense to move on, but I think that out of our wide receivers right now, the more likely player to get traded is still Jerry Jeudy. I think that is still a strong possibility. I haven't looked at stats today, so let's go ahead and actually do that together here. We'll come transition over here and take a look at stats together. Looks like we finally got some people coming on in here and rolling in. I don't know what took YouTube so long to push the stream out. That was absolutely weird. But if we come over here, we'll take a look at the box score stats for this game after the Denver Broncos were able to escape with a victory, 19-17. When it comes to Russell Wilson, definitely respectable numbers, and on the eye test without watching the TV copy of the game or without watching the full-blown tape, being at the game, Russell passed the eye test. I thought that he looked pretty damn solid. Didn't exactly look like a world beater, but he looked pretty damn solid. I'll definitely say that. Run game, loved to see this, man. Everybody got involved in the run game. Javonte, 15 carries, 82 yards, 5.5 yards per clip. Jaleel McLaughlin, 5 carries for 45 yards. Absolutely awesome to see Jaleel starting to get involved. He also got a pass catch for 1 yard, so nothing too outlandish there. Javonte with 3 catches for 14 yards. And then Samaje Perine as well. 2 carries, 10 yards. Russ's 21-yard scramble was his best play as a Bronco. He had a couple of plays today where, I mean, they weren't necessarily big plays in terms of yardage like that 21-yard scramble was, but he had a scramble where he got out of a would-be sack on the drive where the Broncos kicked a field goal late in the game. And if he had taken the sack there, that wouldn't have been a field goal. The Broncos wouldn't have been in field goal range. So the fact that Russell Wilson had the headiness to be able to get out of that and get at least back to the line of scrimmage to preserve the field goal, that ultimately ended up being a massive difference maker in this game. When it comes to the receivers, Courtland Sutton had 6 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. Jerry Jeudy, 5 catches for 64 yards. Another day, unfortunately, of Marvin Mims kind of not being a factor. He in fact had a loss on a reverse play. I think the Broncos need to stop trying to do these reverse plays with Marvin Mims. We've seen now time in and time out that only bad things can happen. It feels like Marvin Mims is still going through some of these rookie pains and some of these growing pains and is still kind of struggling a little bit to find his footing as a true NFL wide receiver. He's had some nice plays and he's had some nice moments, that's for sure, but on the whole, the sample size from Marvin Mims indicates that he might not be ready for a more expanded role, if that makes any sense. When it comes to the receiving game, Courtland Sutton, 7 catches, 76 yards, and 6 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. Jerry Jeudy, 5 catches, 64 yards. He got briefly knocked out of the game, although it looked like he just kind of took a shot to the family jewels and got a cup check. So, Jerry Jeudy, definitely, I don't think he did anything to necessarily increase his trade value in this game, but I don't think he did anything to necessarily decrease it either, like he did last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Samaje Perine, 3 catches for 31 yards, a long of 19. Javonte Williams, 3 catches for 14 yards. Troutman, 1 catch for 5 yards. Nate Atkins, 1 catch for 3 yards. Definitely would like to see some more production from the tight end position here. Obviously, when only 2 tight ends are catching passes and each of them only catch 1 pass, that's a problem. Troutman has been a big disappointment. He was playing really well in training camp, but has not played well really at all since then. Jaleel McLaughlin, obviously, with the 1 catch for 1 yard. Defensively, Alex Singleton led us on the day with 10 total tackles. One thing that was slightly disappointing, we didn't get any sacks on Jordan Love, although he did break out of a couple of them. Zach Allen, I thought, had a relatively decent day, although he had a bad missed tackle in the backfield where he could have blown up. I can't remember if it was A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones. He could have blown up one of those cats in the backfield for a pretty big loss, and he ended up missing the tackle. So that was probably the one that kind of sucked there. We got Jess in the house. Good to see you. Says, my YouTube notifications are trash. I don't know what's been going on with YouTube. It's been really weird with the notifications lately, and I'm not the only channel that's been experiencing that based on people I've talked to. We got Crypto Ricky in the house saying Williams had a good day finally. That last play with Russ running out the clock was super sketchy. I agree. If you guys go and watch my post-game reaction from the stadium, I streamed that live, and I was a little scared about that because I thought there was a chance that there could have been 1 second left on the clock, and that would have left the Denver Broncos in field goal range to go, or that would have put the Packers in field goal range because that was on 4th down. Denver would have turned it over, and that potentially would have allowed the Green Bay Packers to kick the game-winning field goal. If the Broncos hadn't have run out all 6 seconds on the clock or whatever it was, I would have seriously started questioning Sean Payton. But then at the same time, if they had punted it, that would have given Green Bay a chance to go downfield, return it for a touchdown, a la the Miracle at the Meadowlands Part 2. Michael says, PJ Locke, 25-yard run from the left side of the football field to the right side of the football field to pick off Jordan Love was the key play to help the Broncos get this win. I agree, man. Dude, that was a hell of a play by PJ Locke. I cannot wait to get the all 22 of that play. That was just absolutely huge. Honestly, though, if we have to go through and talk about the Pat Surtain near interception as well, because that was a play that really opened things up for the Green Bay Packers, and that was one that you can definitely start to question a little bit if you are the Denver Broncos. According to CBS rules analyst Gene Steratore on the broadcast, now I haven't heard exactly what he said, but this is just what I saw on Twitter that he said. If you catch the ball at the same time, if the defender and the receiver catch the ball at the same time, the rule is whoever gets down with the ball and establishes themselves in bounds with possession is awarded the ball. If both are in bounds and have possession at the same time, then by default it goes to the offense. That's the play that resulted, or that's the rule that resulted from the Fail Mary play back in 2012. So on this one, Gene Steratore said Pat Surtain got his feet down before Romeo Doubs did. Therefore, Although it was simultaneous possession, Pat Surtain established himself first. It should have been an interception for Pat Surtain. That's a play that you look back, man. If the Denver Broncos had lost that game, we would have probably been having a conversation about right now about the NFL kind of being out to get Sean Payton a little bit. And you guys know that I'm not one to typically make big, bold statements like that unless there's merit to it. Sean's talked about it himself. You think back to the egregious, awful missed call in the NFC Championship game between the Saints and the Rams. That was one where the NFL league office literally called Sean right after the game. They didn't apologize, but they did tell him that they effed up. Sean was livid about that. It kind of feels like the NFL's kind of out to get Sean a little bit ever since Bountygate. Then Denver, we have 2 games now that the officials could have potentially majorly affected the outcome. Obviously, one of them was the Washington game where the blatant missed pass interference on Courtland Sutton. And then now this one, you have to wonder if there's a bit of a vendetta from the league and from the NFL officiating department against Sean Payton. I'm not somebody who likes to make those outlandish statements without there being merit to it, but I do feel like there's merit to it. Overall, though, man, heading back into this game, another key underrated weapon for us, I feel like this season, has been Will Lutz. Although Will Lutz did have his struggles in the Week 1 game against the Raiders, pretty much ever since then, man, Will Lutz has been lights out. 4 for 4 on field goals on the day, nailed his 1 extra point, hit a long field goal of 52. Will Lutz has been absolutely money for the Denver Broncos ever since Week 1. I feel like we can very fairly say now that that Week 1 game was a fluke and that making the move to go out and trade for Will Lutz was 100% the right move for the Denver Broncos. Will Lutz was a key factor in the Denver Broncos winning this game, and I just wanted to shout that out. Conversely, though, man, if you look at it, the play that also ultimately kind of decided this game was Anders Carlson, the Packers rookie kicker, native of Colorado Springs, went 1 for 2 on his field goal attempts. He missed one of his field goals. That ultimately was the difference maker in this one. So if Anders Carlson nails that field goal, maybe we're having a completely different conversation right now, because the Denver Broncos did ultimately let the Packers back into this game, especially in the second half. The Packers got the ball heading out of halftime, and they drove downfield. Fortunately for Denver, they did force them to settle for a field goal. Denver then went downfield and scored a touchdown. A really beautiful play design by Sean Payton to get Courtland Sutton open on a wheel route. Loved that play design. Can't wait to break that down as a film study. But then Green Bay went downfield, and obviously they got a touchdown. Was that the, that was the Romeo Doubs touchdown. And then after that, Denver, I believe they went 3 and out. Yep, they went 3 and out. And then after that, they surrendered yet another touchdown. Jordan Love to Jaden Reed. That was a pretty long extended drive. 11 plays for 76 yards, 6 minutes and 19 seconds off the clock there for Green Bay. But Denver, I want to talk about Russell Wilson on this field goal drive, on this last field goal drive right here, because this was absolutely key. So on 3rd down and 5 right here, Russell Wilson was going to be sacked in the backfield for about a 5-yard loss. That would have knocked the Denver Broncos out of field goal range, and that would have potentially allowed Green Bay to get back in and just go downfield and win it outright. By this point, Denver was down 16-17. But Russell Wilson was able to get out of the sack, and he got back up to the line of scrimmage. It did actually go down as a sack for a loss of no yards, but he made it basically back to the line of scrimmage, and that preserved the field goal. That was absolutely huge. And then another key play that kind of is going to go under the radar a little bit was this massive holding penalty on the Packers left guard Elton Jenkins. That was right after A.J. Dillon had ripped off a massive run for 29 yards, and it set Green Bay up at the Denver 44. They were going to have a chance to go downfield and never let Denver see the ball again. But right after that, that holding penalty prevented it, and then that's when P.J. Locke got the but that's when PJ Locke basically got the interception there to seal it. So I wanted to shout Russell Wilson out for the heady play there to get back to the line of scrimmage, and he had another play that I distinctly remember saying, that was a really smart play, Russ. So Russell Wilson played really well considering, man, the last couple weeks, it's been kind of a struggle for Russell Wilson. I thought that today he put us in every position necessary to get the win, and we were able to execute when we needed to execute. We were on our P's and Q's when it mattered most, and that ultimately allowed us to go downfield, or to go down and get this win. Five Nights at Freddy says, PS2 got robbed out of an interception. Yes, he did. He 100% did. They executed that last play with perfection. Money snap, perfect scramble, and throw by Russ. Our boys are not washed. Man, this is one of those wins that I know it's a little bit crazy to think about because of the way that the Denver Broncos have played over the first few weeks and just the overall lack of talent on the roster. But if you go back and look at my preseason predictions, the Broncos are only one game off, or I guess two, because I think I did predict us to beat the Jets. That was kind of a toss-up game. That was a prediction I made even before the Aaron Rodgers injury. But we're not too far off from my original record prediction for the Denver Broncos going into this part of the year. It wasn't until later in the season when I thought that they would start ripping off wins. But at the same time, you look at their schedule, they've got some daunting opponents coming up, man. First of all, we've obviously got a home date against the Kansas City Chiefs next week on Sunday. That's going to be one where the Denver Broncos, although they did hold Kansas City to scoring just, I believe, 18 points or whatever it was, 18, 19 points, but that was mostly because Kansas City was kind of toying with the Denver Broncos a little bit, running a lot of trick plays, doing some stupid stuff in the red zone that they normally would never do. They knew that the Denver Broncos were an inferior opponent, and they were kind of just playing with their food a little bit, basically. I don't think that's going to happen the second time around, especially considering that the Denver Broncos are coming off of a win. I think Andy Reid is going to go out there and put an absolute clinic on the Denver Broncos. We're going to be heading into a bye week at that point, and we'll probably be staring down a 2-6 record. I imagine a couple of trades will happen after that, and then that's when the schedule starts to get a little interesting for Denver, because coming out of that bye week, we've got Buffalo on the road on Monday Night Football. On paper, that should be a massive loss for the Denver Broncos, but we've now seen for 2 weeks in a row the Buffalo Bills play down to their competition. They should have lost to the New York Giants at home, and they did lose today on the road against the New England Patriots, another one-win team. So, on paper, the Denver Broncos should lose by a ton to the Buffalo Bills. But this is a game that the Denver Broncos could, in theory, win. Cleveland Browns is after that. Their defense is absolutely disgusting. That's a game where I know it's going to be a big challenge for the Denver Broncos, but at the same time, the Browns have some really big questions on offense right now, especially with Deshaun Watson. In fact, Watson got pulled from the game today against the Indianapolis Colts, and the Browns actually were still able to rally and get a win. That was impressive. Their defense was really, really good in that game, especially in key clutch moments, just based on what I saw off the Jumbotron. I haven't watched that full game, but what I saw off the Jumbotron at the stadium, their defense came in the clutch in key moments, but Deshaun Watson basically got benched today. So that's another game where if our offense can at least put up points and outscore the Browns offense, we could potentially win that game. I really think we could. It's going to be a low-scoring defensive battle, that Cleveland game. And then after that, we've got another dumpster fire team in Minnesota. So I could see a scenario that the Denver Broncos rip off a couple more wins here. I really could. Russ's awareness and decision-making was so much better today. Oh, God, yes. It absolutely was. He was really, really solid in those situational football moments. And there was a couple of points where you saw Russell getting coached up by both Sean Payton as well as the quarterback's coach, Davis Webb. They were reminding Russ to be smart, don't put the ball in harm's way, don't take any stupid sacks, all that stuff. You could see Davis actually pointing to his head, to his temple right there, just reminding Russ as he was going back on the field to be smart. I believe that was right before actually that play where he was able to get back to the line of scrimmage to avoid the sack to set up the field goal. So again, man, Russell Wilson played with a lot better awareness today for sure. I imagine his awareness will go up at least by 1 in Madden after this week. The Broncos are not good at losing. It's just not our culture. It's true, man. I mean, we'll win games that we have no business winning. That's just kind of how this team is sometimes, man. We'll win games that we have no business winning. And I will also say it was really good to get a win today at home of all days when I wouldn't say Broncos country was outnumbered at our own stadium, but it was definitely about a 60-40 split between Broncos country and Packers Nation, man. Packers Nation, shout out to them. They came out with an absolute big-time presence, multiple go Pack go chants during the game. You heard the Packers fans get really, really loud on third down at times when the Broncos offense was on the field. In fact, I was kind of worried the Broncos would have to go with a silent snap count at home just because of how loud the Packers fans were. Last time I remember that happening was 2018 when we played the Pittsburgh Steelers. The stadium was loaded with Steelers fans, and we sent them home with an L after Shelby Harris picked off Big Ben in the end zone. So this is one where it's always good to get that win when you have a bunch of the away team's fans invading your stadium. We didn't have to listen to those Go Pack Go chants after the game. I mean, Broncos country was super riled up after that game. Our first win at home, not counting the preseason knockout against the Rams. It was just really good to finally get that win and not have to do the walk of shame out of the stadium. Our line did a relatively great job today, too. They gave him almost too much time in the pocket. They did do really well. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the YouTube notifications. It's just being weird. I was wondering why it was so loud on third down. I was like, our fans are smarter than that. Yeah, no, it was Packers fans. It was absolutely Packers fans. They were definitely going nuts. I was in a row of Packers fans, and I've got nothing but respect for the Green Bay Packers and Packer Nation. We're both teams that have a lot of history in the NFL, a lot of history of winning in the NFL. And I have no ill will at all or disrespect or anything like that towards the Green Bay Packers. It was good to see them come out in droves. It was great to send all those Packers fans home with an L as well. And trust me, there were a lot of salty Packers fans that I heard as I was leaving the stadium. When I was walking out to go catch the train to get to my car, I was chatting it up with this one Broncos fan or with this one Packers fan that was just absolutely disgusted with the way that they lost and was fully on the fire Matt LaFleur and fire Joe Barry bandwagon. Joe Barry, their defensive coordinator. Overall, man, Green Bay Packers definitely showed a lot of red flags about their future in this game. Jordan Love did not play well whatsoever. There's some serious questions now if Jordan Love actually is the quarterback of the future for the Green Bay Packers. And now, for the first time in over 30 years, the Green Bay Packers might not have a franchise quarterback. And that's kind of crazy to think about, honestly. I totally remember that Pittsburgh takeover during Tebow time. That was another one. Pretty much any time the Steelers come to Denver, the terrible towel always travels well. So you will see a lot of Steelers fans. And again, because they're waving their terrible towels, I feel like it's a lot more noticeable. There have been other times as well where the opposing team's fans have invaded our stadium. I can think of two off the top of my head in 2021 that really stood out to me. Eagles and Ravens. I mean, both of those teams' fan bases are extraordinarily passionate. They travel well. They will literally fly across the country to watch their team. I was in a row in the Eagles game in 2021 of a bunch of Eagles fans that were from Philadelphia, and they are season ticket holders at home at the Link in Philadelphia, but they flew out to go support the Eagles in this one. So yeah, man, there's just some of those teams out there where the opposing team's fans travel just really, really well. But Broncos country, that doesn't mean Broncos country's presence wasn't felt either. In fact, this was one of the loudest games that Mile High's been in a while. Broncos country got really loud there, especially after that PJ Locke interception. So it was good to see Broncos country come out, even though they were a little bit drowned out by some in Packer Nation. Yep, Vaughn is back. Vaughn is definitely back. I'm just glad to see that Vaughn is starting to find his footing again. I don't know exactly how well he played in the Bills game. I got to go back through and kind of review some of what's happened throughout the rest of the NFL, but again, man, it's just good to finally be able to talk about the Denver Broncos winning a game against an opponent that at least garnered some higher level of respect than the Chicago Bears. I mean, losing to the Chicago Bears, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But we got a win against an opponent that, while they haven't played good football, I know a lot of pundits and analysts coming in had us losing this game. And it was one, again, where a lot of the opposing team's fans were in the house to witness it. It's just good to finally talk about the Denver Broncos getting one of those kinds of wins. And getting a tough, hard-fought win where it was kind of back and forth a little bit, but the Broncos rallied and executed at a high level at the times where they needed to. We didn't see this team completely fall over and die like we've seen them do it multiple times. When Green Bay took that lead, I remember getting that little bit of a gut feeling in my stomach like, oh crap, here we go again, man. We're going to lose this game once again. This team is going to give up. They're going to flop over. They're going to die. That didn't happen. This team actually showed some heart. They showed some tenacity, and they showed that they were able to rally in the face of adversity, and that goes a long way, especially for the culture that Sean Payton's trying to establish. This win makes me feel a lot better about the culture Sean Payton is building. Last few weeks, I was really starting to question it, especially after that Kansas City game. But now I can see a vision, and I can see where this team is trying to go, and it at least makes sense. It's not to the point where this team is complete doom and gloom and they need to tank. Yes, would it probably be better off for the Denver Broncos in the long term to completely go out there and lose? Absolutely. But this team does have too much talent to do that, even though they don't have a lot of talent. And we do have coaching that's not going to let us go out there and do that. The Broncos are not going to end up with the number 1 overall pick. Today established that there are much worse teams out there than the Denver Broncos, the Green Bay Packers being one of them. I'm going to be going on my All NFL channel probably at some point within the week, and I'll make a video about the Packers because I got to be honest, man, this game taught us quite a bit more about the Green Bay Packers, in my opinion, than it did about the Denver Broncos. The Green Bay Packers were a team that really got a lot of their warts covered up by having a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. They don't have that anymore, and some of these flaws that the Green Bay Packers have, just in the way that their team is constructed, has starting to be exposed. And not only that, Matt LaFleur is starting to get exposed as a fraud of a head coach, in my opinion. I think Matt LaFleur, he's a good offensive play designer, but that's about it. I don't really think Matt LaFleur is a good head coach. I think he was carried by having a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. Yep, the Broncos put out orange terrible towels after that Mile High terrible towel takeover. Our Broncos country always travels great too. Absolutely. I mean, every time we play the Chargers in LA, it's always a Broncos home game down there. So much orange in the stands, even more than what happened today with the Packers. Like, when we go to SoFi to play the Chargers always have to use a silent snap count at home. You pan to the crowd, and it's just all orange. So Broncos country, also one of those teams that travels really, really well. That's why I have respect for other teams that travel well, such as the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jess says, second half, you could tell Green Bay was trying to punk us again, going for it in the 4th and long as if we're chumps. So happy to see our guys play with pride and get that dub. 100%, man. 100%. It was just good to see that pride, see that tenacity, see that fight. It tells me that this team is trying to push themselves in a positive direction. They're not just completely flopping over and dying in the face of adversity. They are starting to respond, and you like to see that. You really, really do. Broncos kept Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon over 100 yards rushing, Michael says, and that was a big key as well, because throughout the first at least 4 or 5 weeks of the year, the Denver Broncos possessed easily the worst run defense in the NFL. I was really surprised when they held Isaiah Pacheco under 100 yards last week, and now we've gone out and we've done it for a second game in a row where A.J. Dillon, he did have a couple of big explosive runs, certainly, but overall, I thought that the Broncos' run defense rallied. If you're going from giving up to over 200 yards per game to 137, although 137 yards rushing certainly isn't great, it's not ideal, it's a hell of a lot better than giving up over 200 yards rushing a game. Anytime you give up over 200 yards rushing to your opponent, you've pretty much kissed a win goodbye. That was one of the biggest problems for the Denver Broncos. I can especially pinpoint it in that Washington game when Brian Robinson was running all over us. Gage, I'd like your view on my thoughts above that starts with the organization has to do better. Let's see. The organization just has to do better with developing, scheming, and acquiring players. 100%. 100%. We've proven that time in and time out. We've acquired players. I mean, you look at the 2019 draft where we thought we had it made, man. We brought our tight end of the future in Noah Fant. We got a potential franchise quarterback in the second round in Drew Lock. And to top it all off, we got one of the best offensive linemen in the draft in Dalton Reisner. What happened? They never developed. So even if the Broncos get their draft picks right, they have to develop their players. Just like Jess says, the Broncos have to get better at not only identifying talent, but developing it when they get into the building. We've shown over the last couple of years, though, with guys like a Pat Surtain, Quinn Miners, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, so that gives us a positive sign that players are developing at a higher level. Now, as far as scheming is concerned, I mean, I do feel like the scheming on both sides of the ball for the Denver Broncos has been relatively disappointing, especially from an offensive perspective. But again, this game showed you some signs of life and gave you some things to build off of if you're the Denver Broncos in terms of scheming for the players that you do have in-house. But at the same time, this offseason, the Broncos have to go into it with a vision of what exactly they want to do schematically and bring in players that fit that mold. But at the same time, as we get into the season, they can't be afraid to break away from that mold if it's not working. They have to be willing to evolve with not only the personnel that they have, but what their opponent is doing to them as well. And at least over the past 2 weeks, we've seen the Denver Broncos do that. So, Jess continues, no amount of high draft picks can make up for these front office deficiencies, but good leadership can optimize mid picks. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Could not have said it better myself. RD played so much better, focused, solid tackling, and of course some clutch plays. They are finally looking more like our Denver Broncos. Not orange crush yet, but not orange slush. Yeah, 100%, man. It wasn't perfect. It was far from perfect. If the Packers hadn't have shot themselves in the foot, they probably would have won this game. But there was plenty to build off of based on this defensive performance. And that alone, in my opinion, based on where this team is right now, that goes a long way for me. And just to see the heart and fight and tenacity that this team continues to show, even faced with fans and media alike basically ready to hold the funeral for their season, it looks like this team isn't quite ready to hold their funeral just yet. I said before the season, Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be a special player for the Broncos. Go Broncos. 100%, man. You can go back and we all know my infatuation with Jaleel McLaughlin, so it's really, really awesome to see Jaleel making those big impact plays. I mean, this dude is an explosive playmaking threat that I really want to see get the ball even more, because when you have 5 carries and you get 45 yards, 9 yards a clip, whoo, man, that's good. So, again, man, I love Jaleel McLaughlin. Been a big fan of his ever since we picked him up as an undrafted free agent. And to see him producing in this Peyton offense is absolutely huge. If he reaches his ceiling, man, the Broncos could have a really strong 1-2 punch at running back with Samaje Perine or with Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin. And then obviously Samaje will always have his kind of niche role. You know, I don't think Samaje is ever going to be a guy that sees more than like 10 touches a game, if that. But Samaje will be around and will always have that sort of niche role for this team, and it's good to have Samaje in the building. So I really loved what I saw from the run game today overall. This was probably one of our better games running the football and truly taking time off the clock, going on long extended drives. I'm curious who won the time of possession battle. Almost dead even. Denver was slightly lower, but there were some points where Denver did go on some extended drives, was able to take some time off the clock, especially there in that second half. All right, guys, we're at about the 45-minute mark, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Go ahead and get a video or two out on Denver Broncos Syndicate as we do. Just wanted to come in and check in with you guys and sort of wrap up what we saw today from our team and really just go over how good it feels to get a win finally. I understand that there are some that may feel a little disappointed about this win because of where it affects our draft position. But at the end of the day, I'm never going to apologize for getting a win in the NFL. And we got a win against an opponent that, again, did shoot themselves in the foot. But still, good win, man. Good win at the end of the day. Yep, Dillon and Jones under 100 together absolutely was huge for us. Again, AJ did rip out a couple of big runs, especially there in that second half. That big run on the final drive potentially could have put Green Bay in field goal positioning, but thankfully Elton Jenkins got called with a hold and that backed him up. And on the next play, that's when PJ Locke had his interception. That was a huge 3-play sequence there for the Denver Broncos. Absolutely huge. It did feel like Denver owned the clock, didn't it, Jess? That's why I was kind of surprised when I looked at it and Green Bay actually won the time of possession battle. But in times where it was critical, especially in the second half, that's when Denver did do a good job of managing the clock. That's something we would not have seen under any circumstances with Nathaniel Hackett last year. 24-17 Philly, let's go. But that's not something that we would have seen with Nathaniel Hackett last year. So to see that again is just a huge step in the right direction and it increases my confidence meter in Sean Payton. It definitely does. All right, Broncos country, we're going to go ahead and dip out of here. Thank you so much for tuning in to this post-game show. Before we dip out of here, guys, be sure to leave any final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns. Also, cat, get down. Sorry, guys, I have to go deal with a cat problem. Or no, Grandma's got it. Thank you. Thank you. But anyway, guys, before we dip out of here, if you could just be sure to leave a like on this stream, I would really appreciate it, as well as subscribe to the channel if you have yet to do so. As I always say, those are two free and easy ways to show your support, helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country, just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I am your host, Gage Madrid. Thank you so much to Jess for tuning in, Michael for tuning in, Alex Smith for tuning in. Let's see who else we got here. We got Crypto Ricky, DS, Garrett Shelton. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in.